Hello everybody, my name is Sean, and today I'm telling the story of Egg, a 70s prog rock trio that created 2 rock symphonies and were regarded as one of the first bands in the Canterbury Scene, but Egg came from London, and it wasn't until later that they collaborated with the jazz rockers of the Canterbury Scene. Hugo Martin Montgomery Campbell, or better known as Dirk Mont Campbell, was born in Egypt on December 30th of 1950 and was named after his grandfather, composer Martin Shaw. His British military father was stationed in Kenya, where young Mont would be exposed to non-Western music. When he was 10, his parents sent him to boarding school in England. Growing up, he played some piano, guitar, and French horn, and would join a band with his friends called The First and Last. It was in 1966 that he moved to London, and in 1967 he made new friends at the City of London School. Dave Stewart was born in the Waterloo section of London on the same day that Mont was born, December 30th of 1950. He started piano lessons when he was 9 or 10, but got a guitar at 15 and joined a band called the Southsiders. One day his friend Steve Hillage brought his guitar equipment to school, and Dave figured he would never be able to play guitar at that level, so he switched over to focusing back on keyboards and organs again. Steve Hillage was born August 2nd, 1951, in Chingford in East London. He started learning piano at the age of 4, but became obsessed with the guitar and badgered his parents until they bought him one at the age of 9. He and Dave were already friends, but in 1967, Steve started jamming with Mont, who would switch over to bass after realizing Steve was in another league at the guitar with his Clapton-like blues rock solos. They put out an ad in Melody Maker magazine, and Clive Brooks responded. Born in East London on the 28th of December, 1949, Clive got his first drum kit when he was 15, and his first band was called Sounds Like Six. A very loud and expressive drummer, he won out over all the other drummers that auditioned, plus he had a van, which is a very big bonus. Though already a powerful trio, Dave Stewart was persistent that the band would be even better if he contributed organ. The newly formed psychedelic blues rock band Uriel performed covers of bands like Cream, The Nice, and Jimi Hendrix. Mont began writing songs, and the band liked to do long psychedelic jams. They got a residency at the Ryde Castle Hotel on the Isle of Wight, where they basically rehearsed in front of audiences at least 4 nights a week, and ended up sleeping outside in their van, even though they had been promised better accommodations. One night, Steve Hillage disappeared from stage to fix a string, but was gone for such a long time that it really forced Dave Stewart to learn how to entertain the audience without a guitarist in the band. After their time on the Isle of Wight, Steve Hillage left the band to study at Kent University, where he would occasionally jam with members of Canterbury bands Caravan and Spirogyra. The leading Canterbury band, Soft Machine, didn't have a guitarist in those days, and I'm sure their growing success was part of the reason why these 3 musicians decided to carry on as a trio without a guitarist. They started to play music composed by Mont with contributions by Dave Stewart. Uriel would perform at the Middle Earth Club, which would see performances by bands like Soft Machine, The Nice, and Pink Floyd, and soon they would sign with the Middle Earth's management under the condition that they changed their name to The Egg so that it didn't sound so much like Urinal. In 1969, they signed with a subsidiary of Decca Records called Darum Nova Records. However, shortly after signing a contract under the name Egg, a new and short-lived label called Evolution was looking to produce a psychedelic album. Steve Hillage was on holiday from university, and material was thrown together quickly at Mont's house. The 4-piece band had just one day in June to record and mix an album that they released under a name called Arzachel, which was named after a crater on the moon. Because they were under contract with another label, they were credited under fake names, and this album went under the radar and was forgotten about, but has always been a highly sought-after collectible for those who are in the know. If you've learned something today and are enjoying the video so far, please just take a few seconds to give it a like so that YouTube knows to suggest it to other people. And please consider subscribing and checking out my video on the wildflowers to learn more about the beginning of the Canterbury Scene. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. This quickly put together psychedelic album has a fair amount of variety. Steve Hillage and Mont Campbell share vocal duties and bounce back and forth between each other on the first 2 organ-driven songs. The end of the first song, like much of the album, has wailing guitar solos with a lot of great note bending. The second song darkens things up and takes its name from an H.P. Lovecraft demon. We hear an organ-driven instrumental and a blues rock number called Leg, which is basically the blues classic Rollin' and Tumblin', with different lyrics. There is a longer and more epic psychedelic blues rock song, and we top it off with an almost 17-minute piece of improvised psychedelic madness with too much reverb, but it's certainly a blast. Back down to a trio, August 69th of 1969 saw the band's first official release under the name Egg with the single 7 Is a Jolly Good Time, a silly, self-aware song that sings about learning to step away from 4/4 and take advantage of all the possibilities of untapped rhythms. Catchy and humorous songs and odd time signatures are one of my favorite things found in the Canterbury Scene, and though this band's later catalog is largely instrumental, this is still a really fun introduction to the band. Their debut self-titled album was recorded at Lonsdale Studios in October of 1969 and released March 13th, 1970. The first side of the album has shorter tracks, 3 of them being their unique prog rock sound with jazz and classical aspects and vocals by Mont Campbell. There are a couple of short psychedelic pieces and a rocking version of a piece by Bach. The B-side contains an over 20-minute instrumental jazz rock symphony. Though Mont is the primary composer, they consider themselves joint composers, and all of the songs are credited as being written by all 3 members. The album did not initially include either of the songs from their first single, though they do appear as bonus tracks on some future versions. The 2004 reissue also includes Movement 3 of Symphony Number 2, which had been omitted from the original album over worries of copyright strikes, because it sounded too much like pieces by Stravinsky and Holst, both of whom Mont Campbell was very inspired by. The very first pressings, however, contained the full symphony and included a note admitting that they stole from The Rite of Spring, while later copies had a note that mentioned how it needed to be removed. The record label didn't do enough to promote the album, and unfortunately it didn't sell as many copies as they were hoping, but it did receive good reviews from the press. The band played shows along some other great bands, and they had gathered a loyal following of fans. In May, the group recorded their second album at Morgan Studios, but they had been dropped by their management, and their record label seemed hesitant to release the album. Eventually, a supporter that worked for Melody Maker magazine wrote an article about the situation, which put a spotlight on the band. The album's producer, Neil Slavin, was also a big supporter of the band, and his persistence helped convince the label to release the second Egg album, The Polite Force, in February of 1971. I don't think I'm alone when I say that this is my favorite album by the band. It starts with a slow and heavy riff on the organ, and we soon get a little bit more melodic, and this epic 8-minute track tells some of the story of when they were performing on the Isle of Wight. We get a killer organ solo before returning to the slow and gritty riff for the end of the song. Track 2 is a really strange track. Like most Egg tracks, it is filled with changing odd time signatures, but top it off with some sporadic sounding trumpet and saxophone countering with the vocals, and we get a rather unique piece, kind of akin to something that Gentle Giant would do. We then get a track that takes its name from one of the short psychedelic pieces from the previous album, but this time we get over 9 minutes of psychedelic sound collage. It's reminiscent of Revolution No. 9 by the Beatles, and my cat isn't able to sleep through it. The second side of the album has one complex instrumental song called Long Piece No. 3, which is broken down into 4 parts. On top of his bass playing on this epic song, Mont also contributes some piano, organ, and French horn. The album got good reviews, and the band was able to play some bigger gigs, backing bands like Yes and Gentle Giant. In the summer of 1971, they were writing material for a new album, but the record company wasn't committing to putting it out. This time also saw Chris Cutler of Henry Cow forming a short-lived group with Dave Stewart. The Ottawa Music Company was an experimental rock orchestra that would perform compositions by everyone involved, as well as some covers. They only played a few shows for fun, and the group's lineup seemed to grow with each performance. 22 musicians ended up contributing to it, including Steve Hillage, Dave's future wife, Barbara Gaskin from Spirogyra, and all members of both Henry Cow and Egg. Meanwhile, Steve Hillage was happy with material he had written for a new album and recorded demos of the material with Dave Stewart. Steve's friends in Caravan got him in contact with their manager, who was able to use the demo tape to get Steve signed to Darum Records. Steve started a band called Con, but his keyboardist left the band about a month before recording, so Dave Stewart was brought in for the November 1971 sessions for the album Space Shanty, which is definitely one of my favorite albums in the entire Canterbury Scene. In early 1972, Egg had presented demos of some of their new material on BBC radio shows, but momentum had slowed down significantly, and without a record label backing them, they broke up after a final performance at the Roundhouse on July 9th of 1972. Mont was understandably tired of all the hard work with little success, and he stepped away to get into spirituality and philosophy. He spent some time working as a plumber and went on to get a diploma from the Royal College of Music. Clive Brooks was invited to join London-based band The Groundhogs, and Dave Sinclair stepped down from his position in Canterbury supergroup Hatfield in the North in order to allow Dave Stewart to take his place. After the first Hatfield in the North album, Dave Stewart was able to negotiate for a farewell album by Egg due to his new connection to Virgin Records. Egg returned to the studio in August of 1974, and December saw the release of The Civil Surface on Caroline Records, a subsidiary of Virgin Records. The album contains 3 8 to 9 minute songs that had been previously heard as demos and at their live shows: Germ Patrol, Enneagram, and Wing Out the Ground Loosely Now. Surrounding these songs we have wind quartets and preludes that I do enjoy in context of the album, but it makes sense to me that you're more likely to hear the 3 epic songs on somebody's playlist. Henry Cow members Lindsay Cooper and Tim Hodgkinson contribute Windwoods to tracks 1 and 6. Barbara Gaskin joins a choir of a few other female guest vocalists for the middle of Prelude, the 4th track, and Steve Hillage rejoins the group for the only song that Mont sings on, the 5th track, Wing Out the Ground Loosely Now. Mont Campbell plays French horn when he joins 3 other guests for the 2 wind quartet tracks. Germ Patrol is really out there and reminds me a bit of Henry Cow thanks to their collaboration, and there is also a super fuzzy bass solo which is really cool. Enneagram kind of feels like a jazzier version of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and has a great keyboard solo. Wing Out the Ground Loosely Now starts with a bang and later has Steve and Dave dueling each other basically, so it's obviously a must listen. In more recent years, there have been CDs and collector's editions released, and of course that's a great way to support the band and their families. Unfortunately, we lost Clive Brooks in 2017. Rest in peace, and thank you for the good music, good sir. If you're looking for where to start with this band, Wing Out the Ground Loosely Now, the song I was just talking about, is a great way to start, as well as their single, 7 is a Jolly Good Time. But I would also highly recommend just jumping into the first or the second album by this band. They're both a blast. And I also really enjoy the psychedelic album Arzachel, and that's of course a great way to go as well. I will continue to talk about these musicians in upcoming videos, so please be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe so you can hear the stories of bands like Hatfield in the North, Caravan, Steve Hillage, and many, many more. Please leave a comment down below telling me what you thought, and tell me what band you think I should do a video on this style for. And until I see you again, have a happy listening session.